Right, we're live on YouTube. And we are now recording as well. Again, if you want to follow us on YouTube, please go on the event website and there you'll be able to find the link. All right, it is now 1 p.m. Bangkok time, and the floor is yours, Freddie.
Yes, thank you, George. Yeah, good afternoon for those following us in Asia, and good morning for those who are connecting in Europe. Welcome to today's panel, Responsible Purchasing Practices Amid COVID-19 and Beyond. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the co-organizers of this forum, UNDP, ESCAP, the International Labour Organization, UNICEF, UN Women, and the Working Group for Business and Human Rights. Our thanks go also to the supporters of this forum, the Swedish government, as well as the European Union. My name is Freddy Guayacan. I'm the program manager of the Responsible Supply Chains in Asia program, which is a partnership between the European Union, the International Labour Organization, and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. This panel is jointly organized by AMFORI and SEDEX with the collaboration of the International Labour Organization. Well, before starting, we start the discussion today. We would like to know a bit more about the audience, the type of institutions represented, as well as the gender balance, the geographic representation. And for that purpose, we are launching a poll right now. This will appear in front in your screens, and we'll have it for 40 seconds. And as I said, the idea is to capture a bit, what is the profile and characteristics of the audience. We appreciate the answers from your side. Very glad to see that there is a high representation of women in the panel, 84%. In terms of institutions, the private sector is the predominant one. And then the majority are in Asia and the Pacific, participants from the Asia and the Pacific, 3/4, 3/4 of the audience. So have we closed the poll?
Oh, sorry, I thought the poll was just going to be on for 40 seconds.
Yes, well, good. I mean, the 3/4 of the participants here in the region, then the 1/4 in Europe, majority are women, and we have also the majority of participants also from representatives from the private sector. Well, as it was mentioned before, this session will be recorded and also broadcasted through YouTube. I'm very delighted to be joined by the speakers today, which are representatives from SEDEX and also from AMFORI. Those are two organizations committed with the sustainability and the promotion of social responsible labor practices in global supply chains, as well as representatives from the buyers and the suppliers in supply chains. So today joining us, we have Joyce Chow, who is the Director for Asia and the Pacific from AMFORI. We have also Magali Martovich, Director of Responsible Sourcing from SEDEX. We have Catherine Kang, the Managing Director of Sunshine Fashion Accessories and Garments. And we have Mrs. Caroline Bousset, the head of Group of Sustainability and Corporate Responsibility in Freestaat's Kansas Group. Well, as many of you know, the global supply chains have been heavily disrupted for the current pandemic. The disruptions come from both sides, from the demand side, due to the lockdowns, the different lockdowns imposed, to prevent the spread of the virus across the different countries. And of course, this has had an impact on the aggregated demand of goods. There have been a number of closure of shops, and also there has been there is a lack of confidence when it comes to having decisions for consumption. The disruptions also come from the supply side. So there is a lack of inputs for the production of goods and services. And of course, that has stopped the production of different goods in some specific supply chains. I mean, that's the case, for instance, of electronics, of automotive. In agriculture, you find the same. The cancellation of orders and the delay of payments to suppliers are among the most common issues in relation to and in the relations between the buyers and the suppliers in global supply chains. And of course, that situation has had an impact on jobs, those which are directly generated in the supply chains, but also those that are indirectly generated, with many workers losing their jobs and their incomes, therefore, and also their livelihoods. How to invest in a sound and sustainable relationship between the buyers and the suppliers? That question is fundamental and critical for responding to the shocks and crises like the current one. So let's hear more from our panelists today on these issues, from their experiences, and also from the research that they are carrying out in their respective institutions. So let's start with Catherine. Well, during this unprecedented pandemic, many of the companies have decided to cancel their orders to keep themselves afloat. However, the burden is also falling into the suppliers. Could you tell us from your experience and also the experience of your peers, how has been this situation in the last few months, and how does the current situation has affected the workers in your business and in your respective supply chain? Thank you, Catherine. Over to you. You are muted. Now.
Hi, Friday. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much. As a SEDEX member, I have this opportunity to participate in this conference, so we can share with you. Because obviously, over the last 5 months, we all faced the tough challenges and difficult times due to the effects of the global COVID-19 pandemic. But life in China and most of the world now is returning back to normal. Here, I would like to share what had happened in the past 5 months and in our factory with our customers, our buyers, and how we cope with this situation. So basically, if I bring a situation back to 5 months ago, we have literally before and after period. Before the 23rd of January 2020, everything is normal. Life is stable. Our business really have a steady growth. Though I know the situation is quite tough, but we have managed to have a little growth. But since the COVID-19 pandemic break up, things really, really dramatically change. So we have literally gone through 2 phases, because from the end of Jan to mid-March, we have like phase 1 that's mainly affecting all our supply chains with our factories. Because Sunshine Fashion is a high fashion accessory supplier. We're working with most of the top high street brands like Bestseller, Inditex, Arcadia, Topshop, and most of our customer based in Europe. And our production side is in China, Myanmar, and Bangladesh. We supply their high fashion accessories. And all order has been placed. But with this COVID-19 happened in China, is break up. we're literally in the middle of the Chinese New Year. And that makes the situation even worse because that means all the factories shut and everything's closing down. The factory is closing. The uncertainty is quite panicking. It's bringing the panicking to everyone because we unsure when the office will be back to open, when the factory will be open up, and when the self-lockdown can release. And because bearing in mind with those panic, we have to quickly react and manage. Because working from home, giving this the opportunity that we can speaking and communicate with factory in the same time, though we're not allowed to go out or go to the factory site, but we managed to get all the latest update on our production and what's happened with our development, what we're going to affecting, because literally we are facing deliveries after the Chinese New Year. And that is our top priority. So we managed to get all those information together and putting in a big overview in the same time. We feed back to our customers straight away because we believe things happen we can't control, but let's do what we can help at best to release the pressure from factory and also helping buyer to have an overview, to know what's going on, how to react, to release some pressure. So with this communication we had between our factory and our buyers, so we luckily managed to get through the phase one by extending some deliveries. And also we quickly fixed out giving flexible deliveries to release some sales pressures. But then after the mid of March, it's break out to everywhere. As our majority customer base in Europe, most of European countries being affected by this pandemic. That means offices being shut, shops being shut. Some of the buyers are not allowed to work from there. So that's what the panicking we're getting from the customer side, because all the factories say, oh my God, what happened to my orders? Are they going to facing cancellation? Because it seems no one wants to order. What we're going to do with our workers, with our production and our developments and our payments. So we have, once again, after we're moving some stress from factory side, now we're facing with the buying side. And working again from that period, we have to working through with the customer, literally review every order we've got. We have worked out from March till June, we've got about 33 orders. And that is our top priority. So we have working along with our buyers and communicate with them, say what we can do, what solutions for us. And we managed to secure all the orders by those communication with buyers, explain the situation happen and tell them what our solutions are. And we have managed to remove some of the order to a later delivery date. And also helping buyer, we understand the situation as a vendor, a supplier. We actually working together. We have a great factory base. So we working together to helping buyer with offer some discount and even giving longer payment terms to helping the buying side. And eventually we managed to secure every order we have got in hand. And with our factory, we believe that it is a tough situation. It's affecting everyone's life. After the initial shocking, confused, furious, we have to figure out a solution and supporting each other. I mean, with those communication we made and quick reaction we have made, we have managed helping factory and buyer to understand the situation. We are on the same boat. It's a win-win situation. If they're not win, we not win. And now things starting getting better. So now factory get a release, they feel their business is being secured. And the buying side, okay, now we have gone through the tough situation. They have got the supporting from us with helping them removing order and helping them to taking discount and cutting on some stock. And that's giving them the flexibility. So we are working on a long-term and sustainable way. So that's what actions we have taken in the past. And we believe since now situation getting better and life getting back to normal soon, we on a sustainable level, we will try to working closer with buyer and try to working along with factory to giving better product and reliable production. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I mean, for
you.
these insights and to give us a bit of description of what has been going on with you and also with your peers in China when it comes to the production. Thank you. We'll come back to you. Caroline, yeah, good afternoon in Hong Kong. Well, in reality, business have going through a lot in the current crisis. They have faced a lot of challenges, both buyers but also the suppliers. As a buyer, how do you put in practice responsible purchasing during this crisis? What have been also the impacts of those practices in your relations with your suppliers, and how that can impact workers?
Yeah, well, I'll give a bit of a glimpse of hope, saying I think now it's something that sustainability in the supply chain and how buyers treat their factory is something that is at the heart of the business future. So, but what I'll do first, maybe Freddie, is I'll try to a little bit introduce the group, Fristadt Kansas. So if George, you wouldn't mind, or Sassy want to upload the few slides. Thank you. Okay, so this will it's just to give you a bit of the context, because echoing what Catherine was saying and seeing her buyers, we, Fristadt Kansas Group, we're a group of workwear brands, okay, which is slightly different in the way that we operate the business. So the head office is based in Sweden. We've got a group of 9 brands, from heavy workwear that would be safety to light workwear that would be more health. And these brands are from Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark, Germany, the Netherlands, and Belgium. Okay. What we've been working on sustainability for now since 2008 in the group, and I've been with the group since 2013. But I think we've had a long journey in terms of sustainability. What we've realized with this COVID-19 is that it is totally essential now to address sustainability at every step of our company. And if we start by a supply chain, I just would like to show you with this map that you see here, how we're organized. We buy today 30% of our goods from Europe, but mainly Eastern Europe and a little bit Tunisia and Portugal. The goods we buy, when I say goods, it goes from tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 3. And I'll go back to that a little bit later on. And then we buy 70%, okay, from what we called our large Asia platform, mainly from Southeast Asia, which is Vietnam and Laos, also from China, also from Bangladesh, a little bit from Myanmar, and Pakistan and India. So this gives you, and of course, Madagascar, as you can see here, this gives you also a little bit the scale of when the COVID-19 just broke through the pandemic. It has been impacting, I would say, in different stages. So, I mean, echoing what Catherine was saying, we're still into different phases. We are not in phase 1 or phase 2. We still face phase 1 in some areas and phase 2 in some other areas. What we have set up before this pandemic, and this has been going on for the past 5 years, and especially since we joined Amphori in 2016, okay, is like we've trained our quality controllers to basically identify where and be our eyes in the factories. All our orders can only be shipped out of factories once our quality controllers have made their report, which means that we keep an eye on what's happening in the factory, whether it's bad or whether it's good. And in this time of pandemic, it has been a very important tool for us, because we're all stuck in our countries, not being able to work around. Would you mind putting the other slide, please, George? Thank you. So going back a little bit on the impact precisely. Okay, what we've seen is in two different stages. Okay, everything that has to do with safety and heavy workwear, and we've got like 5 brands around that. We've seen internally a sales drop of 40%. Okay, since January and since year to date. What we've been doing is starting by consolidation of our workforce. We're very fortunate because we are in countries in Europe where the government helps, where there is social security in place, okay, and where basically even if we let go some people, it is done in a human, appropriate, and understanding manner, okay, and which is not the case in our supply chain most of the time, and the countries where we buy from. Then for the health and light workwear, we've seen on the opposite a 30% sales increase. Okay, we have brands that manufacture and sell, because we have our own factories also in Ukraine that manufacture and sell health equipment for hospitals. So this has been a big boom. We've transferred most of the production we had in our Ukraine facility for masks, for gowns. So that helps to balance. Okay. Now, with this boom in production from the health system, also from the health department, it helps us also to say, okay, how do we then shift basically their orders to where our brands for safety and heavy workwear have less to produce. So that's because what we have recognized definitely as a first impact, that it is affecting, basically the main thing is it affects our supply chains. Okay, we see that we've got, it brings out, magnifying, as I say, existing inequalities, systemic vulnerabilities and challenge in our own supply chain. So our watchword is that we have a responsibility to work first together, the brands internally, okay, to enable the factories to maintain relationship, make changes in the workplace, and protect, as a first step, the health of the garment workers, on top, of course, of their living. So in terms of now and near term, the main consideration has been, okay, let's honor our obligation and pay in full orders completed or in progress. We've not succeeded everywhere, I'm going to be very honest, okay? We've had some problems. Now, the advantage we have as being workwear brands is that we have long lead times, okay? We place order on 2 or 3 or even 4 months, or 5 months. Sorry, more 3 or 4 or 5 months, which leaves us a lot of time. We nominate, throughout our brands, we nominate 100%, 80 to 100% of our raw materials. So we know where it comes from, because we've got to test its technical garments, because we've got to test every single part of our products and components. We have to nominate the supplies. So we have a good grasp on where our raw materials come from, when they are coming to the factories, and we do a big forecast. So that's quite different from a fashion business, okay? So we've been trying to honor as much as possible, and we've worked since the start with our suppliers, including the more raw material, to plan and secure capacity. Also understanding that it first hit China. Then after China, it was a few months afterwards, then it was Laos who closed. Then Myanmar was still open, but it was small. Then we had Bangladesh closing completely, and it's still not reopening. Same as India, still not reopening. Pakistan had already closed, and slowly they're reopening. So it's about working with our factories to understand one by one where they are. And that's been the work in the brands of the supplier owners. So we really have had, after this first impact, this strong watchword to say we need to address a fragmented supply chain and work on restructuring it. It's been an ongoing work that we've had for a few years, and in my team we've been working hard and often fighting with the buyers in the different brands. Say we don't need more suppliers, we need to consolidate in fewer suppliers, and we need to be able to support them. And as I said earlier, Freddie, when you asked me the question, I think it has given us the power, this COVID-19, and that's the positive impact, to say we have no more choice. We have to do it now. If you could put the other slide, please, George. This is just a little slide to show you how we organize our tiers, okay, in our brands. Today, we've been, thanks to the M3 system, we've been having good visibility on our tier 1 and tier 2. okay? Most of their tier one, 100% are audited. Tier two, I would say 60 to 80% are audited, and we haven't gone to tier three yet. But what I want to say with showing you that is that we're at a point where we need to consolidate on fewer suppliers, and we need to make sure that we have a power amongst the different brands to work with the good suppliers. So where the compliance job stands is that we support the brands to say, okay, you want to negotiate terms, but when you negotiate payment terms with factory, do it in factories that are more on the living wage side. We can't do it with like minimum factory. So we've had a balance in internal discussions saying, okay, how are we going to manage that? Okay, if you ask instead of 60 days, if you're going to ask for 70 days or 75 days in the next 2 months, we've got to balance it with understanding where the factory stands and how we're going to make sure that more or less, okay, again, more or less in the big factories where we've got, I would say, leverage, we make sure that we don't put them in a situation where basically it blows their business. So can we go to slide 5? Thank you. So our key focus, okay, has been to say, okay, we've reduced our resources, so we have to strengthen our processes. And we say it's our internal processes, but it includes, of course, the supply chain. Okay, how are we working with our factories? How is this going to come? We've got to control our costs and increase our savings because some of the brands are on very low cash flow situation. Okay, so how do we basically try to be a little bit more intelligent, okay, and be a little bit more clever, increase the nearshoring production when it comes to not having the fabric being produced in Pakistan, shipped back to Laos, and then finished garments, shipped back afterwards to Sweden or Finland. How can we have Pakistan going to Ukraine and Ukraine trying to make things a little bit more sensible? Same for whether it's from zippers to hooks, whatever you name it. So this is an ongoing work, and we're working with the factories on every other week discussions. Okay, so okay, when are you reopening? And I'll show you how we do that a little bit practically. When are you reopening? How many workers do you have? What is the situation? How much do you have in stock from us? We've paid all the materials that we've had in stock, but we've stopped for some of the heavy workwear brands. We've started placing order to produce. So that means we've got to make sure that there's a good balance there. We've have an ongoing job of restructuring our supply chain by reducing the number of factories. Today, the group has around 400 factories, okay? We know who they are, but some factories, we have no more than 1 or 0.5% of their annual production. And that's been, for me, a message that I've been continuously giving is like, we cannot have that, okay? We cannot have a supplier base that is big like that because we need to concentrate on fewer and see how we can work together in the future. So this is an ongoing, it's to say, let's collaborate in between the brands, okay? We know that factories today, what they're looking for is continuous production, okay? They're not looking for doing the same product or consolidating a buyer. They're just looking for consolidate buying, yes, but they're just looking for continuous production. So in this sense, we're trying to have in our big factories where our heavy workwear is less placing order, we've tried to have our light workwear placing orders. We've also trying to consolidate more in between the tier 1 and the tier 2, as I was saying earlier, and accelerate the rear and near shoring of production. Next slide, please. Thank you. So how have we been doing that? Okay, we've been doing, and it started end of 2019, but doing a very clear product factory mapping. Okay, sometimes in Europe and with the buyers, they think that if a pair of trousers complicated is made in a factory, that the factory cannot do a shirt or cannot do a t-shirt. Okay, and sometimes it's about lack of knowledge or lack of information or communication that basically you don't support your suppliers or factories in the right way. So the idea was to say, okay, let's do a good product mapping, okay, and discuss with the factories. Can they do it? Okay, is a factory that, why wouldn't a factory that is making complicated trousers be able to make a clinic gown? Of course they can, but let's work with them and see how it works. So it's internal and it's also external. Then, well, I won't go into the detail of our schedule, but like we've got a master supply base that goes, that is shared amongst all the brands, that is handled by the sustainability team to also evaluate with the rating of BSCI, the audit rating, but also with our own rating, okay, which is our internal rating with the compliance managers that follow the factories to say, okay, if we've got a factory that continuously on the same, I would say, areas of performance is not improving, then for us, they will get a less good rating. We will try to understand and discuss with them, but if it doesn't improve, then it gives direction to the buyers to say, okay, which are the factories that we trust are improving? We're engaging with the factories as they reopen, and that's the first thing we're doing in now is to say, okay, how are you doing for health and safety of the workers? Okay, depending also on the different regulations that you can have in the countries. Okay, in Laos they are not asking the factories to keep the temperature check record. Okay, but in other countries they are. So it depends. We do it time by time. We train our QCs. We work with our factories in giving them guidance. This is what you've got to look at. Okay, we try to monitor them and we report internally with our customers and through our brand website. I think we're in a time where it is extremely important to reinforce confidence throughout the spectrum, from the buyers to the factories. Okay, factories have to understand that we support them. Okay, that things are difficult, we know it, and we're going to be on the journey with them as much as we can in terms of brand survival. We've also, I mean, following the BSCI recommendation, delayed, of course, the audit, but also relaxed some of the audits. Okay, I think in the first priority we have today is to say, if there's audits starting again in China, we're not going to push them on social security increase in terms of percentage. Okay, let's see that they do the health and safety measures in place first as a good step. Okay, let's just try to be a bit pragmatic. Okay, what we want to make sure is that is this improving? And we also are trying as much as we can, and that's where we've got the support of Amfari also, is try to discuss with some of our little players in our supply chain to see how they can get support from government or organizations if there are funds available just to support the salaries of the workers. So the last slide is just to show you a little bit what we're working on a weekly basis with our factories as they reopen. It's just we're sending them this little self-assessment. It's very quick, and it's just to see also, it engages the discussion that each of our compliance managers and then afterwards the brands have with the factories to say, okay, what is your situation? Where do you have problem? It's also a good indicator also for production. Okay, we have to be clear that some of the production process have been slowed down drastically because of social distancing. Okay, so it's got a lot of disruption. So that's a little bit how we've approached it. Okay, it's an ongoing process, again, because countries reopen one after another, because orders in some of our brands are not picking up yet. So we think that we will have a clearer view on the aftermath of the COVID, probably in September, October for us in Scandinavia. Thank you, Freddie.
Caroline, thank you very much for taking us through, through these points, the research, but also, the fact that you reiterate that the purchasing practices and the relations between buyers and suppliers are at the heart of the business future. Yeah. And then this is indeed an opportunity to strengthen the relations between buyers and suppliers. Thank you for that. And also we took a note on the importance and the relevance for having a product and factory mapping, which is, I think, a key in the traceability, but also in the monitoring, and for businesses to be able to get the information, but also to have more transparency towards consumers, towards buyers, and the other stakeholders. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
So now I would like to introduce Magali Martovic. she's the director of the responsible sourcing from SEDEX. SEDEX has recently published guidance for business to respond responsibly to the COVID-19, as well as to report based on a survey. They produced this report, which takes basically the source from 3,300 responses, and on a research from SEDEX on this. The main outcomes of this research show that the most common challenges in the supply chains are the disruption and inability to get inputs and raw materials, which is felt by 43% of the businesses, while 56% of the suppliers stated that their circumstances, they are taking supportive actions from the buyers. But that percentage, however, is 72% when it comes to the service sector. However, 20% of the businesses have had also order canceled by consumers, so that have a heavy impact on some of the companies. And 4% expressed that they have experienced some delays in the payments in the terms agreed in the contracts. Magali, could you tell us a little bit more about this research that SEDEX conducted? And how can responsible purchasing practices, how these practices can address these issues and be instrumental to promote labor conditions in the supply chains? Thank you, Magali. Over to you.
Thank you, Freddie. Yes, absolutely. So just first on SEDEX, for those of you who do not know us, we are a 60,000 strong member organization headquartered in London with offices in China, India, Australia, and Chile. We were founded about 15 years ago, and our mandate is to help exchange ethical data between buyers and suppliers. We are very, very well known for our social audit methodology, SMETA, but we also, of course, provide other tools and knowledge to support members improve working conditions, whether they are in their own workplace or throughout their supply chain. So Freddie, on your first question about the results of the survey, I think what the survey really establishes is the unprecedented level of disruption to the global economy and to most supply chain. As you say, close to 70% of the respondents expect a decrease in their revenue. So this year is going to be really difficult for the global economy. As you mentioned, half of the business who are still, working really struggle to get input and raw materials, and we're seeing inflation creeping in. And a third of all the respondents had to lay off workers in some form. So we're really talking of change on an unprecedented scale, and that is really worrying. And what it shows, and a bit it relates to what Caroline was saying, is that the pandemic has split the world into two. On one side, we had businesses that had an acute drop in demand, like Caroline said, in the sort of the safety, gear. And on the other side, business that had to increase, yeah? And so for those businesses like Catherine, who faced, an acute drop in demand, the consequences in terms of furloughing workers, laying them off, company closure, long-term financial resilience are really difficult. And this is very true in the fashion sector, which is the one that has been the most affected so far, and what our respondents say. But it's also true in construction, in logistics, so no one is really spared. And what is very worrying is that those sectors are usually characterized by a very high vulnerability of the workers. So the consequence for the workers in terms of their livelihoods will be very dire. The World Bank actually estimated very recently that the pandemic will push up to 60 million people into poverty. So we really are talking of dramatic scale. Then on the other hand, we have those businesses that have seen, an increase in demand, but in the face of very difficult working conditions and in some cases acute labor shortage. As you know, as all of us, we're kind of working from home. Our mobility is heavily restricted, and this means that companies just can't get the people on the production line to produce. There are also, as we've said, this disruption of supply, just a very challenging operational environment where workers have to keep distance, but yet deliver product on time. So this puts significant pressure on businesses and on workers to deliver those goods, but also to protect their health. Yeah. And so as a result, a lot of our respondents confirmed they were doing additional overtime, and trying to desperately recruit extra worker. So as a result of these two situations, the sort of dichotomy, the global workforce faced clearly two challenges. We have workers are out of employment or with reduced employment. The economic impact is really devastating. With less jobs, competition for employment will increase. And many people, particularly women or migrants, they will be more vulnerable to exploitation because we start seeing the sort of mafias, going around criminal activities. We will see an increase possibly of forced labor, of child labor. So we really have to watch on that. And for those in employment, ensuring safety from COVID-19 is crucial. We know many workers are not able to, physically distance at work or in their work accommodation, which is even more challenging, or on their way to work, or indeed even have access to PPE. It was quite striking in our survey that 25% of the respondents did not increase their use of PPE. So it could well be because of indeed the difficulty in getting it, but it does pose a risk to possibly contracting COVID-19 at work, and many workers are concerned about their health. And equally, there are pressure on overtime and less pay. So, but what's sort of reassuring is, and it really speaks to what Caroline and Catherine say, is that many companies are trying to take supportive actions to protect their workers, and to provide financial assistance. So that's clear that in those unprecedented times, much more needs to be done to ensure those actions are really adequate and effective to ensure worker safety. And here we're really talking about financial safety and health safety. And then on your second point about responsible purchasing practice being instrumental to address those issues, absolutely. I think this is, essential, and it should really be the starting point. You need to pay suppliers fairly and implement good purchasing practice if you want your suppliers to be able to survive, right? And ensure that their workforce is safe and employed in decent conditions. This is absolutely crucial. So again, from the survey, we are seeing that the majority of our buyer members are providing some support. As Caroline and Catherine showed, 56% of the suppliers who responded to the survey indeed stated their customers were being supportive. This is, of course, more pronounced in those industries that are deemed essential. In the sectors where shops and businesses had to close, it's much more challenging indeed to provide support. However, I think it really is an interesting time to consider how buying organizations can really embed more responsible sourcing practice in their operations. And we can see that actually, being responsible pays. There is evidence to suggest that, companies with, better social performance, higher ESG rating, stronger responsible purchasing programs, just are more resilient in the face of those crises. And they're better able to weather those crises and then recover. And that's very, very important. So we really believe that, companies should have a fair and mutually beneficial relationship, with their suppliers. And when I say mutually beneficial, this includes, buyers, suppliers, but critically also the workers. This is essential for their supplier resilience and for providing decent work conditions. And what we think is that for many companies, it's about an attitude shift from seeing supply chain as something separate from their business rather than an absolute integral part and critical to their business success. Yeah. If supply chains are a key part of the backbone of your company, then you have to ensure that part is healthy as well, yeah, and is resilient. And what we have seen is that sadly in many sectors it really isn't, and that as a result, workers suffer from that. So whilst we'll still have a long way to go, what also is interesting and possibly well, what's interesting from the survey is we have seen that many suppliers still feel a bit nervous about engaging and communicating with their buyers. Catherine showed really good examples, and Caroline as well, in terms of being ready and open to listen. But we know it's not always the case, yeah? The survey showed that in one specific country, we had up to 60% of the suppliers responding that they do not even consider communicating with the buyers as an option. That is very, very worrying. If you do not communicate, it's impossible to provide the support. We also asked, suppliers what they really needed, yeah, to help them manage the impact of COVID-19. And actually, it was quite striking because they really are requesting sensible, basic good practice. The most common request was for half of the respondents better forecasting, so they can just plan ahead, they can organize themselves, they can just put the resources in place to weather the crisis. The second most requested thing was to just simply not cancel order. Stick to your word. I know it's not always possible and tough decisions have to be made. We are aware those are unprecedented times. But whenever possible, try not to cancel order, even if they are being made or shipped even. And the rest just want to renegotiate timelines or just not being penalized if they are late for not delivering on time. And then indeed a good chunk are asking for a delay in audit, which is something that as well as SEDEX we have very much supported. So yeah, we very much hope that buyers will consider and start working on those very important aspects. And just to say, so SEDEX as well as a bunch of other organizations, including of course Amphori, Better Buying, ETI, and so on, we're also working on useful guidance on purchasing practice. So that's it from me, Fred.
Magali, thank you very much. Very, very interesting. I mean, you took us through all these vulnerabilities that workers face in some specific sectors, in particularly in the lower tiers. And also interesting what you, I mean, what you call the dichotomy between those sectors that are suffering the lack of demand, and therefore they have to go with higher layoffs. Of course, the workers don't have access to unemployment benefits, to social protection. But then on the other hand, also you have the sectors with the higher demand, where unfortunately workers also face challenges and difficulties because of the lack of PPE and also, I mean, deficits in occupational safety and health. Also interesting the point on how responsible sourcing practices can help businesses, suppliers and buyers to become more resilient, to become more active at the time of crisis, and also to manage the risk, and of course, ultimately benefiting their workers. I mean, this keeping good relationship between the buyers and along their supply chains, the need for communication, but also the need for information as part of their business practices, and how this is important also to face well, some challenges and crises as the one that we unfortunately are living in. Thank you very much for that, Magali. Well, now we'll go with our next speaker, Mrs. Joyce Chow. Amphori also conducted a similar survey to assess the challenges and needs of the buyers and from the producers as well. And you also issued a similar guideline on responsible purchasing practices specifically for the times of COVID-19. Evidently, this crisis is, of course, hurting alike both buyers and also suppliers. Why should they continue to commit to responsible purchasing practices and to support their suppliers in a time of crisis? And what is the business case for that? Over to you, Joyce.
Thank you, Freddie, and thank you, everyone. It's my pleasure to join this panel discussion today. So much have been said, and mostly positive, and maybe I will reflect some ugly truth in the daily lives we have been facing. I was wondering, after so many ideas have been shared now, how can I add value to all? Talking about, say, we are also doing a survey, similar audience and a similar context. So I try my best to present different perspectives, what we have collected, or some common things we can work together. Would George just please show my slide now? Yeah, thank you. Just along the same line, a few brief words. Please go back to the first slide. I'm sorry, because many people do not know how to spell or pronounce. We are a non-profit organization, head office in Brussels. We have members over 2,400 brands, retailers, and buyers who are coming from over 45 countries. They have represent a global supply chain worth 1.7 trillion euros per year. And in our database, our members have direct suppliers from over 100 countries, altogether over 60,000 now, and nearly 40,000 they are based in China. And this coming second is India, Bangladesh, Turkey, and Vietnam. So during this pandemic period, it all started, say, from China. Back to January and February, we were shocked when I first heard from one of the trading company members. They even nearly cried when they told us, show us some correspondence. By that time, only maybe Asia has the problem, and we read the sentence is punctual delivery despite of the COVID-19. And so this was by that time the buyers telling the suppliers from sourcing countries when they thought this is only the problem of certain countries. So when I look at your question, Freddie, you said, this crisis is hurting brands and retailers as much. It hurts me actually, this question, because it hurts everyone, not only buyers or retailers. Nobody can be exempted or can be the exception. But at the very beginning, even in the past 6 months or 5, nobody knew it could become a pandemic. This time is enormous. The impact is unprecedented because unlike other disasters, when we have earthquake in certain countries, other countries can help. When we have, say, volcano, earthquake, or some tsunami, other people can help. Or certain industries are affected, but this time it's universal, everyone. And mobility confinement makes us very difficult to move on. So we heard lots of rumors here and there, and we find it's difficult to find out the truth. That's why back in April, we set up a global COVID-19 task force within Amphori, led by our president and chairman. And I represent Asia Pacific to join, representing the sourcing country. So we conducted a survey which has 3 parts. The first part is quantitative from members retailers. So we collected over 160 questionnaires completed with members from 17 major developed economy countries. And the second part is qualitative phone calls. We have our representatives from 9 countries calling members, about 48 dedicated calls to talk to them, listen to them, and analyze what are their needs. And the third part of our survey, we reach out our top 10 sourcing countries. They are all, except Morocco, located in Asia Pacific. So over 400 During that time, within 1 week, we got 400 is amazing to us because by that time, many factories could not work or suspended their production already. So what did we find out? Due to time limitation, I can't share all the details, but on this PowerPoint at the bottom, we have written an article and highlights. Interest party can contact Freddie later on and you can access it from our website. The most important highlight I want to share with you here today is the top 3 common challenges. Regardless you're buyers or producers or suppliers, from where, in what industries. By the way, our Amfori member supply chain source goods covering 21 industries. We are the biggest in the fast-moving consumer goods social audit systems. So the top problems are just similar to what Magali has already found out, share with you: cancellation and reduction of orders due to decreased demand of consumers. And we also have the second challenging part is the suspension of logistics systems. Yeah, I heard that even by that time, even when China started to resume production, trying to export goods to other countries, but they can't. Nobody could take it, and this is unprecedented experience for all. And the third common problem is cash flow. Is the biggest challenge for all companies, be it your producers or your members. So when we see this kind of, after we did this reality check, what have we done? Maybe you can move to the next slide, please, Georges. Yeah. We find, actually, after we set up our task force and validated the results, we have quickly, our main office drafted and then approved this responsible purchasing practice guidance document. Is free downloadable for all. And we find this is, many people are looking forward for vaccine for cure for the COVID-19, but we find this RPP guidance is applicable to all to save business, to help supply chain recovery. Why it matters? This is to answer your questions, Freddie, you said why buyers have to do it. And actually, same as what actually Caroline said, no choice. No choice. We have no choice. And many people thought, yeah, every business now trying to stay afloat and to breathe above the water before drowning. They thought, oh yeah, social responsibility, environmental performance is not that important. But actually, this is crucial. This is the life and death critical point that whether you can compete or sustain with your business, have your business relationship with your buyers or your supply chain partners. And no one can be exempted from this exercise. We heard the very good practice from Catherine and Caroline. They are the best practice example. However, this is very time consuming, very resource driven, financially or human resources wise. So you can't do it alone. And we have members like Caroline, but we also have members unlike Caroline. So not many people can have the resources or the capability to do it. So Amfori provides a kind of platform that we can connect the buyers and producers who are willing to work together. So this is how we see why RPP matters. Because when we ask the members, what do they want from Amfori's support or other support? They say government funding. Yeah, we ask the same questions, giving the same options answers to producers. They say don't cancel the order. Actually, government funding from the eyes of the producers is not as important as the orders. So that's something we can mobilize. Yeah, we can't be the government. We are not the government. When we see this answer, that's why we highly recommend we have to cascade this RPP along the whole supply chain. So between April and June, we have been organizing a series of webinars to cascade this RPP to both our members and also the producers. So we have successfully collected some business cases from different members from different countries, Belgium, Netherlands, and Germany. So here I just name one. We have joined this call to action in the garment industry, which is led by ILO. international IOE, representing the employers part, and also the ITUC, the trade union. And I'm sorry, and one of our key members, Audi South Group, is leading on, they have this initiative. They commit themselves to pay suppliers for finished goods and goods in production during this critical period. And they are also proactively seeking dialogue with business partners to promote the ILO labor standards during this difficult time. So their story is published in our portal on this slide, the bottom left-hand side, and you can see the link and where you can also read the other full stories. I think it's important that many companies try to mobilize the resources, what they can do. So the best flexibility, some of our members have demonstrated their capability is to convert the production with the supplies to medical items to save lives first. Without lives, we can't even talk about sustainability. When we ask the questions to our members, have they engaged? Just now, Marguerite told us the perspective of the producers, suppliers. Yeah, they do not want to engage the buyers to talk about the planning. Yeah, when we ask the same question actually to the buyers, and out of that 160 plus members, 65% say, we have engaged our suppliers to plan to adjust the order during this difficult time. So this is very good. But when we ask the same questions to the producers in the top sourcing country, more than half say, actually, the buyers have never shown up or actually contact them to discuss those planning. So this is reflect that we always need to listen stories from both sides. There's no say absolute truth, but we have to identify who are the groups who have not been contacted, what are the root cause, and then that's what is our next step to reach out those members who source from them and encourage them to adopt their responsible purchasing practice. So what if, the last one before I close and we move to round 2 of discussion, I want to highlight here a very practical reason. If we don't do it, you may have already read in early June, this was a big news published. 19 factories from Bangladesh in garment industry is launching a lawsuit, which is not $40, sorry, it should be 40 million. I wrote $40, yeah, $40 million. And they have completed the order shipped to the States, and then one of the retailer members refused, declined to pay. And this is shocking news, and see, that's remind us how important RPP is. Responsible purchasing practice is a must do. And despite, we can't survive. So this concludes my part. I know in the first part, we have been a little bit overrun. So now I save the time to move to the second round, and I look forward to more sharing from others. Yeah, thank you.
Joyce, thank you very much for your intervention and for your key points here. Nobody can be exempted from the current crisis, and then you call for the cooperation between buyers and suppliers, but also with the different stakeholders. And also you highlighted how the lack of information can also affect the investment and the consumption confidence, and therefore having an impact on the performance of businesses, on the profit, income, and of course their capacity to survive. You also highlighted the 3 main issues that your members pointed out as the main issues in the survey that you put together. Well, the first one, which is the decrease in demand. The second one, which is related to logistics, and the third one with the cash flow. I think this is a very valuable information, well, not only for the businesses, but also for policymakers on how to develop, to shape policies and responses for the current crisis. The importance of responsible purchasing practices. Well, this is, why to implement responsible purchasing practices in the current pandemic? Well, because it is a way to address risk, because it's part of the social responsibility of businesses, and also because CSR, corporate social responsibility and responsible business conduct, are key to sustain global supply chains and trade in the current circumstances, and therefore to keep going the current economic activity, and therefore with the respective impacts on jobs and also, well, on incomes. Very interesting what you mentioned, the trap of the single story, that I call it, and therefore the importance of listening to both the suppliers but also to buyers on what are the difficulties and the challenges that they face. Thank you, Joyce. Well, before going to the second round of questions, I would like to remind the audience on the questions. I mean, you have the possibility to put some questions to the speakers, to the panelists. So feel free in the questions and answers section of the Zoom to put your questions, so that we can then at the end of this conversation pass it to the different speakers. So we'll go for a second round of questions with our panelists, and I would like to start with Caroline. Because we in the first part we saw, well, what has been the impact, what has been of the current circumstances, how the current crisis is impacting both buyers and suppliers, and the different mechanisms. But now, what next? What is the way to go forward? And so I would like to ask you, Caroline, whether your company has discussed any plan for the post-COVID-19, and also from the perspective of buyer, do you foresee any challenges in committing to buying responsibly after this pandemic? And what are the expectations you have from your suppliers? Caroline, over to you.
Thank you, Freddie. Well, I start by your last question, but even if I've got a few slides, but I'll start by answering your last questions. I think it's time, and I would say this is a deep belief that I have, first before talking about my company. I think it is highly time for suppliers, and I mean factories, to have expectations for their buyers, okay? Because we've always seen the world where it's the factories and the buyers on one side. But I think this COVID on the long term will have to bring things closely into perspective, which is to say now, I mean, buyers are accountable, okay? Whether it's the stakeholders, I mean, from customers to, for us, it's B2B in our business, but from the final customer to organization, to investment companies. If you're not a really sustainable company, you will not go through this crisis. And anyway, you cannot have like good quality, as you were mentioning, Magali. We see a real connection between quality of the products and compliant factories or dedicated factory to improve their compliance. So this is definitely, there is a cost there. It's always been a difficult situation to sell, whether it's to factories or to sell, whether it's to sometimes top boards of companies, the importance of sustainability in terms of cost. You can measure it on the environmental side, but it's difficult on the social side. But I think COVID-19 as a crisis has brought that on the table. We can also see it in terms of costs on the social aspect. So if, George, you don't mind uploading the slide 2. Okay, just to give you a few hints, what we've seen and what we see that we need to address very clearly in our brands is we've seen an increased stakeholder awareness on social and environmental sustainability, even amongst those that were previously not onto the topic, whether it's not interested in what's happening in the factories, okay? And I must say, you've got that happening in companies, whether, or privately, whether it's not believing in climate change, even if this is, I would say, a swearing word from a Swedish company, nobody can not believe in climate change, but we can see it from the Netherlands. So you've got things like that. I think today it's brought the topic on the table. Just to give you an example, we produce garments for other businesses. It can be security agencies, it can be hospitals, I was saying, but it can be all companies, so all sorts of businesses. The first topic now when we answer a tender is, and it has been for the past year and a half, is how do you address social and environmental sustainability? If you do not comply with that to start with and in action, okay, basically you don't even, you cannot even go further than the first step. So this is the first step. So we know that. The other thing that we're going to see and put in place is, I was just scratching it lightly in the first discussion, is we need to be transparent about our supply chain and our practices. Okay, yes, from a health and safety point, but also from a price minimum living wage point, and I'll get back to that. I mean, what we are pushing very hard in our amongst our brands is to say, okay, you've communicated with price and products before with your customers. Now it's time to have discussion where we're going to communicate with purpose. Okay, we're going to tell you where we work, which factories we work with, what they have achieved, and how it's good also for you. Yes, we've had these examples lately where from our Norwegian brands that were negotiating with their customers to say, okay, we can do these products for you, but we need you to support. We can't decrease the price because we can't do that to the factories. Okay, we are also in these brands facing problems. So I think there's, so the, and the final customers were accepting to either take the freight at their expense, either increase the price. So I think we need to be having, like you were mentioning about Magali, about factories that are afraid to talk with factories, with their buyers. Okay, we're in the middle because we've got also buyers, but it's the same thing. We need to be all sitting down around the table. Say, okay, guys, how do we go from there, and how do we get there? If you can put the other side, please, George. So if you can put, thank you. So for us, the key focus, okay, is to be fully transparent and increase our product traceability. Whether it's for the final customer, for everybody, you need to be clear to say, where does it come from? We've got a very good example in Sweden, which is H&M, okay? They lead the way on a lot of things. They've been extremely transparent about their supply chain, but since 2 years, they've even pushed it further, is to say they will encourage even their competitors to work with their suppliers, okay? And I think that's the way we've got to be going. I mean, we do it at the moment internally, but on the long term is to say, yes, we need to be open about our good supplies, okay? Our good factories that are implementing things. We are addressing also lower risk through higher occupancy of the factories. I mean, there has been in all the companies, you know, buyers can jump from one factory to another factory for 10 cents, okay? Honestly, on the long run, if you don't look at the first quarter KPI, but you look on the long run, the 10 cents that you've saved on a first order, okay, you will have lost it by at least 10 times at the end of the year, because you'll have had new, so it's like, let's get all the costs that are in the production to try to make it together to see where we can save cost and where we know that we cannot anymore save cost, okay? On the long term, for us, our big target is to reduce our environmental manufacturing footprint. Okay, this, there is no question about it. So what I was showing you earlier about the 30% and 70% is probably going to be shifting, probably slowly from 50 to 60% in Europe. We need to be thinking about producing close to where we deliver. Okay, so it's probably not always going to be possible in terms of raw material, but I think this is something that we've got to be clever on. So what it means, in fact, is that we've got to reinforce the partnership with our factories and the dialogue. So now we're just like assessing how bad it is and how can we help in the urgent aftermath. But then on the long term, it would be to have factories that are our partners, full stop. Okay, I keep on saying since a very long time in my group to say, like, the factories we have, the supply chain is the DNA of our brands. Let's never forget that. Okay, and more because of visibility, I think it's like the way we are with our factories is the way we conduct our business, okay, and the way we treat also our colleagues internally. So it has to be even throughout, I would say, the stakeholder scope. So we can also be thinking, and that's how we're working, is to say, okay, how can we work more with our factories to be so that they're more agile? Okay, minimum quantity, this we have to work with them, but we also have to work with them in probably involving them more in the process of the full product development and manufacturing. Okay, instead of hiring people back when it's the aftermath back in Sweden or in Finland, where we've let some of our colleagues go, we probably need to educate more in our factories to see how we could promote some of our workers to become these essential. I mean, you were saying that working from a distance or not traveling has been a problem. On the positive side, okay, it's also to think we have to give more responsibilities to the people on the other side. Okay, and they can be approving of samples. Okay, we are already having systems where we send directly through our ERP and our system, we send the tech packs already directly to the factories, but like approval of samples. Do we have to keep on shipping back from Laos or from China samples back to our head offices so that it's approved? No. I mean, there's a lot of little things that can be put in place, okay, which works on environment, works on putting the factories closer to their buyers. So there's also, for us, one of the big things we need to be, and we will be looking at once we've, if I may, cleaned our supply base and know where we are throughout the brands, is how do we engage with our preferred suppliers, okay, in topics that they need to sustain their business. One of the problems we see sometimes, quite a lot of times in terms of improving the compliance in the factories is the level of education. But it's not only the workers, it's also the supervisors, the line inspectors. So we have, or even in the management, how do we improve the education? We've got a factory in Myanmar who's started with NGOs to educate its workers on how they should be treated or not, and what they can accept or not from different people. It takes time, but we need to be putting in, supporting our factories according to also each of our brands' sustainability focus, whether it's human rights, clean energy, waste management. We've got to support them in putting programs that can help them in the future. If you can put the other slide, please, George.
Caroline,
Yes.
We have a few seconds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Voilà. So I think one of the things I wanted to say is also we need, and we feel responsible to include living wages calculator in our costings. I think this is the main thing that we see as a long-term decision, is like we need to give visibility to the buyers of what part of the products, of what they pay goes back to the buyer. And that's it.
Caroline, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I mean, in this message, we have to bring things into perspective, and buyers are also accountable. I mean, you emphasize on the need for support and cooperation to suppliers. It's not only about price, it is about the big picture, about the long-term engagement, and on the importance of investing and working together with the suppliers to be more resilient for crises like the current one that we are facing. I would like to go, unfortunately, we have some restrictions in time, but Catherine, could you tell us, as from your perspective as supplier, how does the current crisis affected your plan for long-term recovery and the future disruptions, and will it change the way you work with your buyer?
Oh, hi, Friday. Hi. Yes, what have just happened is definitely will make some changes in our current business model. And we have already, luckily we are in the transforming. But one thing very, very positive, just I've heard also from Caroline, the buying side, that buyer now started to also realize to working together with supplier and factories. This is really, really positive news. Because at Sunshine, we always believe in transparency and being open and honest with our factories as well as with our buyers. Because if we review back to what happened, without the factory support, without the buyers' support and understanding, we won't make through this situation. So maybe some factories facing shutting down, laid off workers and buying, maybe they're not going to get in the product they need later stage. But now this is definitely what has happened with this COVID-19. I think though maybe the next 3-6 months will be still critical for some regions, but I'm quite positive and confident that it's giving us a big wake-up call to slow down and rethink and decide what we should do, how we act, and who we should be working or partnership with, and how can we keeping our communication channel being efficient and effective. Because before, people always said to me, oh, after this, buyers will reduce on the cost. You need to be sell cheap. I mean, everyone is talking about buying cheap, bargain, but I mean, prices matter, but it's not all matters because there's so many things you need to consider beyond the pricing. Like, for example, like Sunshine, we are strongly believer in the CSR and sustainability. Even after this COVID-19, is also giving us more confidence. We need to continually spare no effort on maintenance of our CSR activities and strengthen our factory base. In the meantime, we also avoiding any audit fatigue and we don't want to have any paid lip service because we understand we need to helping factory reduce the cost, being able to giving sharper price, being competitive, we need to bring down the cost. And in the same time, we believe in the future, buying side need to be more sustainable and not only for environmental, but overall. So we will focus on, for the long term, sustainable fashion range and to be able to offer more high fashion accessories. And we want our product being fashionable, sustainable, and affordable. So buyer, factory, and vendor, we are actually one big team. It's not buying is one side, factory is one side. We're not fighting against each other on pricing, but we need to working together with transparency, with openness and honesty. We can make the fashion world different. So everyone can be a winner. So that is, as we said, our longer term is try to be a leading fashion accessories maker for everyone to making fashion affordable and sustainable. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Catherine, thank you very much. I mean, very glad to hear that responsible business conduct and CSR remains more relevant than ever. I mean, for the survival of business, for the sustainability, and then there are many factors to be considered beyond the pure pricing, and that this is indeed an opportunity to slow down and rethink partnerships between buyers and suppliers. Well, I would like to go. Thank you, Catherine. I would like to go to Joyce. Joyce, unfortunately, I mean, the time is a little bit against us. Yeah, we have a few minutes, but I would like to hear from your side, how can companies integrate responsible purchasing practices in their plans for the long-term recovery and to minimize future disruptions?
Thank you. And Freddie, I do notice about the shortage of the time. I try to cover as much as possible. So Georges, please quickly show my slide. So this is the responsible purchasing practice. It's just a 3 pages content, very easy use guidance. We follow the responsible business conduct mandated by the UN Guiding Principles for Business and Human Rights. And it's a kind of reminder. The key elements in this guidance is to remind buyers and retailers who purchase, they should proceed payments during these difficult times as much as possible where they can or their resources allow, and they should understand the difficulties from the perspective of suppliers and producers, just as what Caroline and Catherine have rightly pointed out already. I don't need to repeat, but remind buyers should avoid unilateral purchasing decisions. It's always discussion is better. And don't cancel order, especially those already in production. And support supply chain partners in these difficult times. And because this is for long term, imagine if we terminate the order just because you can't have a short term cash flow problem, and then you lose a very long term partner. This is not worth. Next slide, please. How to integrate? Yeah, I think there's some very good practices already in action, just like Caroline's, what she mentioned is know your suppliers. Many people trade through trading companies and they do not know exactly who produced the goods. This is the problem, high risk. So know where the sites are, know the raw materials are. We have seen some quick big winner this time in some of the country like China. They quickly convert because they own the whole supply chain. They directly can access the raw material suppliers and they can convert the production line within 7 days. Yeah, miracle. And then I just want to quickly respond to one question here. Yeah, I just saw in the chat box. Yeah, many people can produce the medical supplies, but they are blocked. The shipments are blocked by government. How do we see? Well, there are things we can do and there are things we can't do. There are things we can do during normal times. During normal times, build a good relationship between countries. This is something we try to advocate now. Say even our team in EU try to talk to the border customs and try to see whether there are some routines we can, mechanism we can establish. Even within EU, we should. I mean, in this pandemic, you see, even with among EU states have blockage of essential emergency medical supplies. This is, to us, this is quite strange. It shouldn't be. The mechanism should be established as quick as possible, if not there. If it's there but it's not working, we should review now, I mean, while we are recovering. So this is our advocacy team would focus on. And I think another important thing is in the business, how to address this problem. To integrate responsible purchasing supply chain. Everybody have limited resources or expertise. I was so amazed in January, we received a request of support of medical supplies, raw material supplies from China. And then 1 month later, 2 months later, they started to ship some donation even to our office of medical masks. Because we also mobilized our members to join a portal, which is operated by the China Confederation of Industrial and Economics. There's a portal open. Any suppliers or buyers can upload the information and then they can connect. This is so critical at this moment. While government have different rules and regulations, business should have their own business system can work. So I highly recommend we should open up this kind of platform, connect the platform, don't duplicate the work. I see I only have 1 minute left. So I want to highlight one thing. So when you try to integrate the RPP, know your suppliers, map your supply chain, and then also work with the others, not isolatedly. And the other recommendation is make sure you work with business partners and don't just reinvent the wheel. It's totally not necessary. So I think Aesthetics has been our long-term partners for many years. I know Walter, the China, now Asia director. So we work closely to address issues, and we are happy to have this panel today. ILO and Freddie, we will try to work on the regional basis too. So taking this advantage today, I hope we can send our invitation to you. I saw some questions I can't answer, which is directly addressed to me. So please send email to me and I'll respond to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joyce. I would like to close, I mean, because of the time restrictions, I mean, close this panel with a last question to Magali. And the question is, how do you think we can prevent vulnerable workers from bearing the burden of the future crisis?
Yeah, thank you, Freddie. So I have 3 minutes, right? Is that correct?
Yeah.
I'll be quick. Yeah, we must, I think, you know, workers have been really shouldering the burden of the crisis. Unemployment rate have, you know, spiked everywhere. And again, as mentioned earlier, we're talking about possibly 60 million pushed into poverty. So your question asked about vulnerable workers. So let's spell out who they are, yeah, because I think it's important to name who they are. Women workers, they've been disproportionately affected by those job losses. Workers in precarious employment, including in the informal sector. And that's very, very important now because they've been the first one to be laid off. And when you're on a precarious employment term or work in the informal sector, you do not have access to statutory benefits. Unemployment, sick leave, all of that, so it's just not there. And then migrant workers, or refugee workers who are probably stuck in countries, probably in accommodation that aren't, amazing, or have to continue working in difficult circumstances. So those are the key workers are very, very vulnerable. Doesn't mean that all the rest are not, but those are specific ones. So with this in mind, and again, very, very quickly, 3 points. The role of businesses. Business are, provide an essential income to billions and billions of people around the world and workers, and their role should just not be underestimated. So they are critical in the realization of the decent work agenda and, offering fair and safe working condition tool. And here I'd like to stress one thing out of all of it is the payment of social insurance and social security contribution. That is extremely important to do. If workers have access to statutory benefits, if there is a crisis, it is their safety net, and they usually do not have, any cushion, a buffer to absorb any financial shock. Second is the role of the state. As Caroline said, some countries do provide, support schemes, in terms of indeed the statutory benefits. Others just do not have the financial capacity to do that. So how can the state really work on that to support workers, but also, of course, businesses, to weather that crisis? And then the third point, and I'll be very quick, is indeed the role of the broader civil society. And going back a bit to Catherine's point, the dialogue between buyers, suppliers, but also workers. Workers have been telling us for many years what they want. Trade unions have been telling us what workers want. NGOs exposed, those needs. We need to take those into consideration. We need to actively listen. So I'm conscious it's just right, the end, so I won't go much further, but I'll be very happy to discuss those points, separately with any one of you if you are interested. Thank you, Freddie.
Magali, thanks a lot. I mean, we unfortunately have to close the session. Lots of questions, lots of interest from the audience. I mean, just some points to finalize. Both are affected, buyers and suppliers. There is the need for support and cooperation between both to be able to survive the current crisis, but also to become resilient in upcoming shocks or crises. Responsible purchasing practices are key to promote sustainability, to manage risk, but also to promote decent work along the supply chains. It is important to see the long-term engagement between the buyers and the suppliers to have the full picture, and to try to identify on which factors it is possible to save costs, and on which factors it is not a matter of discussion. Very important point, one brought by Magali at the end on the vulnerable workers. Vulnerable workers remain at the risk of precarious conditions, especially migrants, informal workers, but also women. And I mean, there is a duty to protect and the responsibility also from businesses and from the state. And it is important, definitely, for the state to work, together with the private sector on these working conditions, in particularly on the social access to social protection, to social security, the wages part, and the access to occupational safety and health. The role of both the state and the civil society also remain critical. And last but not least, the role of trade unions. I mean, the importance of engaging the unions in the dialogue between the unions and the employers, and to be able to listen and to engage them. So this is critical to address the current issues, but also to become more resilient and sustainable for future ones. Well, we have to close. Thank you very much to all the speakers for your contributions, for sharing your experiences. Very interesting conversation. Unfortunately, we had only 90 minutes, but I mean, this is something that we should continue. I mean, beyond this conversation, beyond this panel, and we'll make sure that this will happen. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.